So here I am working on my Suzuki 2-stroke 15 horsepower, and I'm making a video because I have not found anything on this particular engine. This engine is also known by Suzuki as the DT15A. And so these are my notes. I bought it brand new, and after a year and a half of usage, I'm giving it a tune-up. Just changed the oil. I cleaned it all up real good. That white stuff is lithium grease. Did a carburetor job, changed the spark plugs, and did adjustments. So I'm a little bit disappointed because when I first opened this thing up, I saw that there was salt water getting in there from running the engine normally, from normal use. And that's disturbing to see salt water inside the engine compartment. It shouldn't be. And so I'm going to try to figure out why that is. I know that there's a hole right here. There's another hole over here. And the same on that side, there's a hole there. And maybe somehow it's getting kicked up unnecessarily. There should be drain holes in there, but there shouldn't be being filled up by the drain holes. Okay, so let's start with the carburetor. I took this thing apart, and the carburetor had way too much corrosion than it should for a year and a half. And of course, that's because the salt water got in. So I took the carburetor off and I cleaned it very detailed. And the drain plug broke, which is a tiny, overly thin screw for the drain plug. And that just snapped right off way too easily. And in general, from handling, this is the third outboard engine I've had. You can see I'm a cruiser. I'm in French Polynesia right now. And so, you know, I am handy with these things by now, and I have a feeling for outboard engines. This is the first one I bought brand new, but I have an old Johnson on my dinghy as a backup. And anyways, handling this carburetor, you can feel that it's dainty. It's thin. All the walls, all the clearances are right up to the limit. So in other words, it's cheaply built. I could be wrong on that. I hope I'm wrong on that. I'm hoping that I'm wrong, but it just seems like it. It seems a little thin. The screws are a little bit dainty. It snapped right off. The drain plug, the bowl of the carburetor, it's thin. I mean, and it's made out of aluminum, and I mean you can feel a little flex on the bowl. I didn't like that, and I cleaned it all up. The engine runs superbly, I should say that, but it's brand new. But anyways, I did clean it up. Another thing that one thing that's an important tip that anybody that owns this engine should know, I always felt like it was lacking its full throttle potential. I could just feel when I would throttle it, it didn't have like it was reaching its full throttle, and in fact, it wasn't. So an important note for other owners out there to check is this. If you see in here, you'll see this screw right here. And that is basically, I don't know what the official name for that is, but I would call it a slackening adjustment. So in other words, when the throttle is at 0, there should be no slack in the throttle drive connections. And in mine, when the throttle is at 0, it wasn't engaging into the mechanism that gives it more throttle. So you need to eliminate any gap that's in between there. So let me point to it just so it's clear. You see this ball right here? That ball rolls onto this. You see how that works right there? The ball rolls onto that cam, and that's what lifts it up and all the way to full throttle. Make sure that if you own this engine, that when you're at full throttle, you're actually at full throttle. And by knowing it's full throttle, you just basically manually push the carburetor all the way until it hits a stop. And it should be hitting that stop when you're at full throttle, not almost all the way. And so I never had the full power out of it. So it's kind of reassuring knowing that I've never run it at its full potential, so that means that I have more performance to gain from it. But it's disappointing to buy a brand new engine that's not already calibrated correctly. So those are my tips right there. So calibrate that to get your full power out of it. This is a cool engine. It's the Suzuki 2-stroke, 15 horsepower. It's the lightest 15 horsepower 2-stroke on the market as of now, which is cool. You got a lot of muscle for the weight ratio. I just drained the oil out of the gears, and it didn't have enough oil in it, so a little disappointing. It feels like they're cutting corners on this. Anyways, those are my quick tips for the Suzuki DT15A.